Hi, I'm Sam with jbugs.com. With the disc brake conversion complete and our suspension lowered, we will address some other issues on our 1963 Resto Custom Beetle. The transmission mounts in the car are separated and will have to be replaced. So we'll pull the transmission out, and while it's out, we're going to clearance it for a larger 12-volt flywheel. This would have been a lot easier to do when the pedal assembly was out, or while we were lowering the rear end of the car. But we realize you all at home may not be able to completely tear apart the rear end of your car, just to remove a transmission. Keeping that in mind, we get started with the front wheels chocked and loosen the lug bolts on both rear wheels. The rear end of the car is jacked up and set on jack stands underneath the torsion housing. The rear wheels are removed so we can access the brake and suspension components. The axle nut cotter pin is removed, and a rear axle nut removal tool is bolted to the rotor so that the axle nuts can be removed. Inside the car, the parking brake cables are loosened, and back at the rear of the car, the cable circlips are pulled and the cables are removed from the brake calipers. Next, the caliper is unbolted from the bracket, and the brake hose clip is pulled from the axle tube so that the caliper and lines can be removed clear of the axle without disconnecting a brake hose or line. With the caliper removed, the brake rotor can be pulled off the axle. This process will be similar for drum brakes, with the drum coming off first, followed by the brake cable. Then the backing plate could be removed from the axle, allowing the wheel cylinder to remain attached to the brake line so it doesn't have to be bled later. The lower shock nut is unthreaded, and the shock is pulled off the mount on the transmission axle. Then the axle is unbolted from the spring plate, and the bump stop and plate are set to the side. The same steps are taken on both sides of the car. Then inside the bell housing, the rear mounts are unbolted from the transmission and rear cross member. The clutch cable is loosened from the clutch arm while making sure to keep tension on the clutch cable. If the cable gets too loose, there's a chance it could fall off the pedal hook, and then the pedal assembly would have to come out. Next, the front transmission mount is unbolted from the chassis. Then underneath the rear seat inside the car, the shift coupler access plate is unscrewed to access the shift coupler, which needs to be disconnected from the transmission. After the safety wire has been cut, the two coupler screws are unthreaded, and the shift rod is pulled from the coupler. Then the coupler is pulled off from the transmission. The transmission can now be removed from the chassis by sliding the transmission back so the nose cone and gear selector are clear of the chassis. Then a jack is used to raise the transmission up so it can be slid back further until the axles are clear of the rear mount. Now the jack can be repositioned and used to lower the transmission down to the ground. With the transmission out and on the floor, the nose cone boot, mount, and ground strap are all removed. Next, the bell housing will be ground down so that we can fit a later model 12-volt flywheel. The transmission case is made of magnesium, and magnesium fires are nearly impossible to extinguish, so extreme caution must be used. Make sure that there is no steel in the area being ground, as a spark could ignite the shavings. We use a small, air-powered angle grinder to remove material from the 4-engine bolt bosses so that we can mock up the new flywheel. We've used a flywheel mounted to a crankshaft along with a clutch disc and pressure plate to show why the transmission must be ground, and use the assembly to indicate where the transmission needs to be ground down. The flywheel is installed into the transmission onto the input shaft and spun a few times and then pulled out. We can see where the flywheel is touching and grind the areas down. The process is repeated until the flywheel installs and spins without contacting the transmission. Then to finish, the original 6-volt starter bushing is removed using a chisel and a hammer. The transmission will be cleaned up. In our next video, we'll cover installing new swing axle boots. Then we'll reinstall the transmission using new stock replacement mounts, and we'll be adding a transmission strap kit to help hold things in place. Stay tuned. And in the meantime, head over to jbugs.com for all your vintage Volkswagen transmission parts and accessories.